Hi, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Pill with Dr. Will. My name is William Solomon. Welcome to the show. Today, I'm really pleased to have with us Janice Nissen, who's a former biopharmaceutical executive who's worked many years in the industry and is trained as a nurse by background and currently is a well known thought leader who does advisory work for many companies in the area of nursing, education, and patient advocacy. Janice, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really pleased to be here and just absolutely love the title of your show.
Yeah, oh, thank you. Yeah, it's a catchy title. And we're very pleased to have you. It's a real pleasure. You have a fantastic background in this area. So I think this is an area in particular that, we at the ACMA get a lot of questions about, especially for nursing and the nursing profession, especially I think given what happened with COVID in the last few years, a lot of attention was given to kind of the plight of nurses during the COVID pandemic and kind of what happened there. So I think what we've seen actually is a lot of people that have done kind of traditional nursing job wanting to leave the hospitals and the healthcare space that's kind of been more the traditional role and to pursue other types of professions. So I'm definitely interested to hear your take on that as we kind of get into the show. So maybe before we start, just so this audience has an idea of who you are, tell us a little bit about your background and kind of, what inspired you to become a nurse and, your career journey.
Yes, thank you. And really honored to be on the show today. I've enjoyed listening to your podcast that you previously recorded. So the reason I got into nursing, I think, is similar to the experiences of anybody that goes to healthcare as it becomes more of a personal one, either a family member or yourself, where you find yourself in the healthcare system because of an illness. And in my case, it was when I was 9 years old. I actually had a ruptured appendix and was actually quite sick with it because it wasn't diagnosed right away. So I was pretty septic by the time they did diagnose it. And at that time, I actually spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Probably today that wouldn't be the case, but back then. And so that was an opportunity for me to really see nurses and what they did. And because I could only have my parents come to visit me, I really was very lonely and felt very isolated as a 9 year old. So the nurses were really very comforting to me. So that kind of started the journey. My mother always wanted to be a nurse, and so she was really supportive of me going into the field as well, even though
Right.
there really were no family members at the time that were into healthcare. So that was sort of the beginning of my journey. I actually went on to become, when I was, I think, 12 or 13, a volunteer at a local hospital. So went back to that same hospital where I was in and was actually volunteering actually in the emergency room.
Wow.
And then later on, I actually was employed there as a nurse's aide. So I have a lot of
Wow.
experience with that hospital.
So you were allowed to volunteer at the age of 12 or 13?
Yes,
Wow, that's
yes,
fascinating.
yes. I
And
know
and
it is.
yeah, I was gonna say because I know nowadays to volunteer, you've got I think be at least 16 or 17, something like that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. Wow. I mean, that must have been some experience at the age of 12 or 13. It really probably made obviously a big impression on you to want you to go into the field.
Yes, absolutely. It really did. And especially working in the emergency room, right? You see all kinds of things in a city hospital. So yes, it was quite interesting. But I think it shows that, very early on, from the personal experience to then wanting to be more involved, that I really had this attraction to hospitals and to the field of nursing.
Sure. All right. So you graduate and you go on. Tell us like what was like the first role that you had within nursing?
Yes, so the first role that I had was actually working at a community hospital in pediatrics. I really liked pediatrics because you really kind of had two patients. You had the child that you were taking care of, or the infant, but you also had the parents. And, because they're always advocating, obviously, for their child's care. And I really liked that aspect of having those two different stakeholders, if you will, and being able to, translate what's right for and answering questions for the parents, but also translating into something that a small child would understand as well. Um, From there, I actually moved from a community hospital to a city children's hospital, actually Children's Hospital in Chicago, and then worked in both medical and surgical intensive care. And that was certainly, I still have very, very vivid memories of the kinds of things that I saw there at a children's hospital, and some of the amazing miracles that you saw, and then some of the amazing tragedies that you saw
Sure.
with children. But great, great experience nonetheless.
Share with us one story, of kind of just one story that really stuck out with you your time there at the children's hospital.
Yeah, so I remember it was a winter day in Chicago, and in Chicago, the winters can be quite bad. And there was a young boy that was brought in. He was like 7 or 8 years old. He had been on a pond of ice in a park, and it fell through. And so in this frigid water, he was underwater for like 10 minutes before somebody could get him out. They brought him into the ICU, and I thought, oh my God, this is just so tragic. This is the end, for this poor child. And they put him in a medically induced coma. And 2 weeks later, he actually walked out of the ICU. I mean, I
Wow.
just thought that that was so amazing. And it was a good experience to start learning about how, drug induced coma and hypothermia can actually protect your organs. And actually, there is a way that you can actually survive something like that. But I just thought it was just such an amazing feat of medicine that that child could walk out of there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we've come such a long way in our advance, in medicine in general. And so walk me through, I guess, your journey, as a segue into the industry, right? Because obviously the pharmaceutical industry and the drug industry in general has evolved leaps and bounds in the last 100 years. What we can do, with medicine and how we can help so many people now that we couldn't, even just 30, 40 years ago is unbelievable. So kind of walk me through how you learned about working in the pharmaceutical industry and how you kind of got into all that.
Yes, yes. Yeah, because it's not a industry that you're really exposed to unless you have a family member. And at the time, then my husband actually worked at a life science company. And so it gave me a chance to understand what that company did. I actually then applied for a role at the competitor to my husband's company, actually. Um, and it was a company that was now starting a home care business as an extension of their hospital products business. And as a result, they were looking for nurse clinicians that would help see patients in the hospital who were going home on high enteral or parenteral therapy, and then take care of them, see them in their home. And this was a brand new business that the company was setting up. And so I applied for the role and was hired. And having the prior intensive care nursing experience was really, really valuable to
Right.
that role. Unfortunately, that business then went away after a couple of years. There were some reimbursement changes. And so I just transitioned with the company from the home care hospital business to pharmaceuticals and went into sales, actually.
Oh, very interesting. And
Mhm.
I have to ask, so you said you worked for a company that was a competitor to your husband. So
Yes.
how was that? You guys are working for competitor
Right.
companies.
It's like, may the best person win. But
Right.
so yes, it was but I think I'm grateful that he was there because it was that entree for me to know more about roles that were possible within a life science company. So it was a very good experience.
And I think that's how a lot of people, years ago learned about these positions. I myself, and if people that have heard the podcast before know my story, I learned about it through a woman at the time that I was dating. And, that's how I learned that there was even an opportunity to work as a pharmaceutical sales rep and that they liked people that had a clinical or scientific background. You really don't know. You really don't think about that. And so I think nowadays, with the advent of the internet and being able to search these types of positions up, the information is so much more readily available that I think it's created a lot more competition for these roles. Would you agree? I mean, that's what I'm seeing, is that for sure in the last 10 to 15 years versus when I started in the industry as an MSL, let's say, there's way more fierce competition for these positions, especially within the area known as medical affairs, which is where the medical science liaisons sit. There's a lot of competition for these positions. I mean, did you see that over the years as you continued in the industry?
Yes, and particularly for the trend towards the greater focus on expanding medical affairs. So I think we've all seen a change from large sales organizations to a movement of taking some of those FTE positions and moving them to grow the medical affairs staff, particularly medical liaisons, especially with the focus on wanting to have a very careful understanding of clinical data that surrounds a product, how that relates to the health economics of a given product. And that's really, I think, a big trend that has grown medical affairs in the industry. Absolutely.
What do you think has fueled that growth? Why?
Well, it's really what the customer wants.
Right.
So, what the customer wants is, in this case, the healthcare provider, the physician, what they want is someone that really can bring information to them since they are so busy and have so many demands on them, that can synthesize information for them and have a good conversation around the choices that they can be making on behalf of patients. It is definitely moved away from quote reminder messaging, which is many times what sales had evolved into. Although hopefully that's changing as well. But medical affairs can bring the scientific information, then can also translate it for payers too into how to make the discriminating choices on what should be on their formulary as well.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely agree. I think that the physician's demand really is for more in-depth information. Do you think part of that is because there's a shift maybe in the mindset of today's physicians versus in the past? For example, I've seen some studies and data where physicians, kind of the newer generation physicians, they prefer information delivered differently. And so if it's going to be a rep that comes in and they're just going to do reminder messaging, their stance is just text it to me or just send it to me via email. I don't need to have someone come in. It takes time away from my practice. Obviously, we know about the lower reimbursement issues among physicians, and they need to see more patients to make as much money as they might have a few years ago. So there's that element as well, I think. But what I mean, being in the industry, what were you hearing about HCPs and kind of how that landscape was changing?
Oh, it's definitely has changed into, if you're going to take my time, what can you discuss with me? What information can you bring that I don't already know, right? That's relevant to me and my practice. So, I think that's the big change that we are seeing, and being able to, synthesize information, as I mentioned, for them, because their schedules are so very busy. And also, bringing in the perspective of what other thought leaders, in the area are thinking. What are some of the clinical practice guidelines and trends that are happening, is really, really important, for the busy physician.
Absolutely. All right, so get back to nurses and talk a little bit more about kind of the trajectory. So you go into the industry, you're working in sales, and talk to me about kind of your transition. So you worked in sales, you had that experience. Then what happened?
So I worked in sales. I then went into marketing, actually, for a group of in-office diagnostic products that the pharmaceutical side of business was actually selling to physician offices. And I really loved that because unlike pharmaceutical sales where it's there to, sort of influence prescribing and you may see the impact down the road, when we were selling these in-office diagnostics, pregnancy kits, strep kits, chlamydia, rapid tests, you could see the sale like right then and there.
Right.
So it was great to be able to have that. And it was a sort of different kind of sort of selling model. From there, I went into training in the pharmaceutical industry for the company that I was working for. And then from there into another marketing role for a pharmaceutical product and sort of evolved into marketing communications and that role, and then sales operations, and then completely left that company and went to another major pharmaceutical company. And that required a whole move to a different part of the country.
Where were you living originally, and then where did you have to go
Yeah,
to?
so I'm originally from Chicago.
Oh, you're from
So it was a
Chicago.
move from Chicago to the Pennsylvania area, east coast of Pennsylvania.
Gotcha, gotcha. And what was your role there?
So the first role that I had was sales operations for this company. And then that led into sales leadership roles for a number of specialty products. So in the field of ophthalmology, urology, and also eventually into oncology, acute care products, primary care,
Right.
vaccines. I really covered the gamut of a number of therapeutic areas and was fortunate enough to lead large sales teams through a number of launches for new products for diabetes, new products in oncology. Just really a fun time to actually kind of shape the trajectory of a launch and work hand in hand marketing in those roles as well.
Now, obviously, when you were in these positions, I'm sure you were encountering nurses that were working in these various roles. For the people that are listening out there on for today's podcast, many of which could be nurses, maybe they're interested in breaking into this type of field. What are some of the skills that they need to help them be successful? What advice would you give them? And what are some of the skills that you found that are really key to be successful to work in the industry?
Yes. So actually, just to answer the first part of your question, did I experience or run into nurses as I was in those various sales roles? I did. And I found that there were a fair amount of nurses. And it was a great opportunity for them to lend the disease and therapeutic medical knowledge that they had. They also knew how to speak to physicians, which was really important and very helpful. They were comfortable speaking with physicians that they would call on. So I think there was that sort of comfort level and that sort of basic confidence. But it really wasn't until I moved into other roles that gave me a broader view when I was in a corporate role to see that nurses were not just in sales, they were in a variety of other parts of the company in medical affairs, in pharmacovigilance, in clinical trial operations, in the research and development department. So they were really all over the company. And the skills that these nurses brought were a couple of things. First of all, they understand patients. They've never forgotten that. Nurses are always the advocate for the patient. So they understood that this product or this service, this resource, they would look at that from the perspective of, would this meet a patient or a caregiver's needs? So that was really important. The nurses are always really critical thinkers. They are able to take a lot of information in and make decisions and move with a sense of urgency. And I think that's another skill that is really present with nurses. And then, finally, they tend to be highly trusted, just like pharmacists, right? The Gallup polls continuously ranks them as very, very high on trust level. And so, all of those qualities are really, really important for nurses as they are working in different parts of these life science companies.
And what about like in terms of if a nurse is listening out there and they're like, you know what, I want to kind of begin to work in the industry, how do they know that this could be a good fit for them, right? Because not everybody's a good fit to who wants to work in the industry. I see a lot of people, especially at the ACMA, we see a lot of people that they're pharmacists or PhDs or medical doctors, and they say, you know what, I want to work as a medical science liaison, I want to work in medical affairs, whatever it is. And sometimes they're not really a good fit for that. They don't really realize what it entails, and they get into it, and they're like, you know what, I don't. I knew someone who was a pharmacist from academia and became a medical liaison. And within a year, he was like, this is completely wrong for me. I'm going back to academia, right? It wasn't his shtick. So how do you know that this is something that would be the right position for you? What are the things that people can anticipate? Maybe kind of talk them through that.
Yeah, it's a very different environment from, we're moving from the clinical space to like a corporate environment.
Right.
And your impact, on patients is going to be indirect. You're not going to have direct patient care anymore, but your impact will be broader because you're impacting so many more people in the work that you're doing. Also have to think about the fact that you're able to lend your clinical expertise, and you're going to be working in sort of team-based environment. It's going to be a work environment that may be a hybrid work from home, or sometimes traveling by your car to see clinical trial sites, for example. And you're going to need to get comfortable with some of the resources that corporations use, like online platforms, Zoom meetings, using Google Workspace, being proficient on
Right.
Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, all of that. So that all of those are, important considerations to think about. And I think also you just have to understand how the industry works. And I can tell you, and I went to school a long time ago, but I can tell you in talking with nurses that are either in school now or recently graduated, it is not part of the nursing curriculum to learn about the life science industry, that it is regulated, how it operates, right? What are their business drivers? Um, how do they, ethically bring their products to market? That's not part of it. And it's important if you're going to come to a role and are interested in a role in life science, that you have to come in knowing how that company operates, how the
Sure.
industry operates. Now, it is a growing industry, and I think that's important for nurses to know and understand. And there are lots of opportunities for nurses in a variety of roles. And I think you just need to think about what are the things that appeal to you in a role across this whole diversity of roles that are possible, and do your own kind of like self-assessment around it. The nice thing is also that you can keep your license, and many nurses that I've worked with in the life science industry have gone and done like a volunteer effort at a healthcare clinic, or they've gone and done a ER shift to keep their hand in their clinical space. So that's another option. And I'm also finding that in life science there's a lot of networks that have been established of medical professionals, of nurses, of pharmacists, of physicians, and that network is a nice support for people
Sure.
who are making that big transition that we talked about. And they found that having a network like that to help guide you through that transition really does prevent that dissatisfaction or turnover that can sometimes happen.
Absolutely, and I know that in the next few weeks we're going to be anticipating something that you've been working on, which is really exciting. So, obviously, like you talked about, nurses aren't trained in this area. There's no curriculum. There's no path forward really for them to transition in. A lot of times, it's just really you and your luck. But you actually headed up the development of the first ever accredited Certified Nurse Medical Affairs Professional Program, or CNMAP. So maybe talk to us a little bit about that, because that's really exciting. So if people listening out there, this is an opportunity for them basically to get accredited and certified in this field, and that'll obviously help them hit the ground running a lot more quickly. So talk to us a little bit about what is it, and what is it really teaching, and how can it help?
I am so excited about the CNAP program, the Certified Nurse Medical Affairs Professional. And the reason I'm so excited about it is that this has been a need that is out there, that is incredibly important right now, since we are losing about a third of our nurses that are just leaving the profession.
Wow.
And that is a really scary situation. Now, health systems have to solve that as to how to keep those people in the clinical setting. But what I'm looking to do is help those individuals who have left that still want to use their nursing background and are looking to take a career pivot, if you will, into the life science industry. But they have to have the background and the knowledge. And that's what the CNAP program does. It tells them everything they need to know about biopharmaceutical, device, diagnostic, really are the main life science industry companies, or and operating models that you need to learn about, the regulations that govern that. What are the roles that you could take on in a company? How do you best position yourself for those roles? And
Absolutely.
then what are the key considerations that we just talked about of making that change from a clinical setting to a more corporate setting? And this program is going to have CE nurse credits, and it's a very substantial program that was designed by a group of nurses and myself, who are bringing the nursing perspective into this life science opportunity. So very excited about it, and it is the first of its kind. And I see that there's going to be a very big market for it, as there are many advanced practice nurses who really have nowhere else to evolve to in a clinical setting, in it working at a health system, and they're looking for options.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like there's a huge need for it. I absolutely agree. So I'm definitely excited to see when that comes out. I think many nurses will find it very, very helpful, whether they're in the industry or they're looking to kind of build their career in the industry. I think it'll be tremendously helpful and hopefully set a new standard for nurses in the profession. All right. So one last question that I have for you:
Mhm.
tell us, who is Janice Nissen's hero? Who's someone that you look up to? Someone that it could be someone personal, it could be someone famous, anyone. Just who do you kind of look up to as an inspiration to you?
Oh my. Yes, I will say the person I look up to is Barack Obama.
Oh wow,
And
okay.
and and the reason I say that is, and not so much because he's the first Black president, he broke through a lot of barriers. I am so in awe of what he accomplished by getting the Affordable Care Act
Hmm.
through legislation, because that is the biggest set of healthcare advances that we've had, since the 1960s, when Medicare was put in place.
Yep.
And it has provided healthcare to so many more people in the United States. And I get very frustrated when I hear people who want to overturn it, because there is so much good that has come from that legislation.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, and that's a whole other show, the healthcare
Yeah,
system in the
right.
U.S. and how that all works. But this is great. I really enjoyed the conversation. I want to thank you for coming on the show. Definitely looking
Thank you.
forward to the CNMAP program, and good luck with all the great work that you do. Thank you, Janice.
Great. Thanks for the opportunity. Take care.
Thank you.